When God gives you a crescent moon, He's giving you a message wrapped in a symbol. That thin curve of light, almost shy, almost hidden, reminds us that God rarely starts anything in its final form. He doesn't hand you the full-grown tree. He hands you a seed. He doesn't give you the complete miracle. He gives you the beginning of movement. And so many of us overlook God's presence because it doesn't arrive with fireworks, clarity, and completion. It arrives as a sliver, just enough to say, I'm here. Pay attention. That's why the crescent moon is a spiritual whisper. It's God tapping you on the shoulder, saying, don't wait for everything to look perfect before you believe I'm working. The crescent moon tells you that the cycle has begun. That light is returning. That growth is happening even if you can't see the whole picture yet. It's God showing you that He has already started something in your life, even though it may look small, fragile, or incomplete. Think about how many blessings we've missed because they didn't look impressive at first. Think about how many prayers God has begun answering, but we brushed them off because they didn't look like the answer we imagined. The crescent moon is God's gentle way of saying, stop expecting me to always arrive fully assembled. I'm guiding you step by step. It teaches us that divine beginnings rarely demand attention. They invite awareness. They don't shout. They signal. And when you look up at that thin arc of light in the sky, you realize something powerful. Even though you can only see a small part of it, the rest of the moon is still there. The fullness already exists, but it's being revealed in stages. That's how God works with your purpose. The full plan is already in His hand, but He shows it to you piece by piece so you learn to trust Him, not just the outcome. So when God places a crescent in your life, a new idea, a gentle nudge, a quiet opportunity, don't dismiss it. Don't say it's too small, too early, too unclear. See it for what it is. The first glow of something God intends to bring into fullness. Just as the moon grows night after night without effort, God's work in you unfolds day after day without fail. All He asks is that you recognize the sign, embrace the beginning, and believe that what looks small now is already on its way to glory. What God places in your hand is never random. It is never accidental. It is never insignificant. God is too intentional, too strategic, too wise to give you something that has no purpose. The problem is not that God hasn't placed something in your hand. The problem is that many of us don't recognize the value of what we're holding. We look at our lives, we look at our gifts, we look at our opportunities, and we say, Lord, this isn't enough. Meanwhile, God is saying, it's more than enough. If you trust me with it. God has a history of taking what looks small and using it to do something supernatural. Moses only had a staff. David only had a sling. The widow only had a jar of oil. The boy only had 5 loaves and 2 fish. But in the hands of God, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. So when you underestimate what's in your hand, you are really underestimating what God can do with it. You are looking at it through your weakness instead of God's strength. There are gifts in your hands, gifts you haven't unwrapped yet. There are ideas you've ignored because they didn't look big enough. There are opportunities you've talked yourself out of because you didn't feel qualified. But God doesn't ask you to be qualified. He asks you to be willing. He doesn't ask you to have the whole plan. He asks you to trust the next step. What you hold is the beginning of what He wants to build, and He can't multiply what you refuse to acknowledge. Sometimes God places something in your hand that doesn't look like the blessing you prayed for. It may feel like responsibility. It may look like work. It may appear inconvenient, uncomfortable, or uncertain. But what you hold today may be the very thing God intends to turn into breakthrough tomorrow. The assignment is often wrapped inside something that doesn't look impressive yet. God gives you the seed, not the harvest, because He wants you to participate in the miracle. And there's something powerful about understanding that you are not empty-handed. Even if life has taken some things from you, God never allows you to stand before a new season with nothing. You may not see it clearly, but God has placed something within reach, something to build with, something to grow with, something to start with, something to fight with. And once you realize that what you're holding carries divine purpose, you stop wishing for something else and start working with what God already gave you. Your hands are not too small. Your gifts are not too late. Your resources are not too limited. Because what God places in your hand, He also empowers. And when you surrender what you have, your talent, your time, your obedience, He breathes on it. He multiplies it. He transforms it. God is not asking you to hand Him greatness. He's asking you to hand Him willingness, so He can produce greatness through you. When you finally decide to trust God with the crescent He places in your hand, when you stop waiting for the full picture and say, Lord, I surrender even this small beginning, a spiritual chain reaction begins. Something shifts. Something opens. Something awakens in your spirit. Faith doesn't just change your situation. Faith changes you. And because it changes you, everything around you must eventually respond. The first thing that shifts is your vision. Suddenly, you start seeing what you used to only dream about. Your eyes move from limitation to possibility. Where you once saw a dead end, you now see a doorway. That's what faith does. It upgrades your spiritual eyesight so you can recognize the opportunities God hid in plain sight. Then your confidence begins to rise. Not because you feel stronger, but because you realize God is stronger in you. You stop doubting yourself and start trusting the one who placed the assignment in your hands. Confidence built on God is confidence that cannot be shaken by circumstance. Fear begins losing its hold on you. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it stops ruling your decisions. You stop letting anxiety talk you out of obedience. You stop letting what ifs hold you hostage. You start moving even when you don't have all the answers. Because the little light God gave you is enough to take the next step. As faith grows, divine strategy begins to form in your mind. Ideas show up that you know you didn't think of on your own. Solutions appear to problems that once felt overwhelming. Insight increases. Creativity flows. You start understanding that God isn't just blessing you. He's guiding you. Relationships begin to shift. Some people fall away, others draw closer. God rearranges your circle so the right voices speak into your future. Instead of draining your spirit, He places divine connections in your path. People aligned with your purpose, people who help you grow, instead of holding you back. And while all of that is happening, old obstacles begin to break. Doors that were locked start opening. Situations that looked impossible suddenly soften. What once resisted, you must eventually release you, because when God becomes your strength, no barrier can remain as it was. Your spiritual hearing sharpens. You start picking up God's whispers more clearly. You feel His nudges, His warnings, His guidance. You begin to sense when to move, when to wait, when to speak, and when to stay silent. You stop living off noise and start living off revelation. Your faith deepens, not because life becomes easy, but because you've witnessed God working with the small beginnings you once doubted. You learn to trust God not for the outcome, but in the process. You begin to understand that obedience is not a burden, it's a doorway. Opportunities begin to unfold. Not random opportunities, but God-shaped ones. Invitations, promotions, open doors, unexpected favor. It's like heaven starts orchestrating the timing of your life in ways you couldn't have planned. It becomes clear that something greater is happening behind the scenes. And then comes one of the most powerful shifts. God multiplies whatever you surrendered. He stretches it, expands it, transforms it, breathes on it. What once looked too small becomes more than enough. What once seemed insignificant becomes impactful. What once felt ordinary becomes a testimony of how God takes the little you give Him and turns it into something only He could produce. There comes a moment when simply noticing what God is doing is no longer enough. Observation may open your eyes, but activation is what opens your life. Too many believers are standing on the sidelines of their own destiny, admiring the signs God gives them, but refusing to step into the assignment connected to those signs. We hear God's whisper. We feel His nudge. We recognize His movement, but we hesitate. We say, Lord, I see you. But we don't say, Lord, use me. That gap right there is where destiny gets delayed. Because God didn't show you the crescent moon for you to admire it. He showed it to you so you would align with it. It's easy to be inspired by what God is doing. It's easy to say amen, to clap, to nod, to feel encouraged. But inspiration without action is just emotional comfort. It doesn't build anything. It doesn't grow anything. It doesn't transform anything. God didn't call you to be a spectator in your own story. He called you to move, to step, to stretch, to obey, to walk by faith when it doesn't make sense yet. There's a time to observe the sign, and there's a time to respond to the sign. And many of us stay stuck in the first part while God is waiting on the second. Think about how many breakthroughs have been postponed because you kept saying, "Not yet, Lord. Maybe later. When I'm stronger. When I'm sure. When I feel ready." But destiny doesn't wait for perfect timing. Destiny responds to obedient timing. God is not looking for perfection. He's looking for participation. He's looking for someone who will say, "God, I may not see the full picture, but I trust the one who painted it. I may not have it all together, but I'm willing to walk with what you gave me." Activation begins when you stop needing all the answers and start trusting the one who holds them. There are doors that will never open until you knock. There are opportunities that will never manifest until you take the first step. There are gifts in you that will never awaken until you dare to use them. God did not place potential in your spirit just for you to admire it like a decoration. He placed it there so you could release it, so you could stretch it, so you could apply it. Faith is not a feeling. It's a function. It's not just something you believe. It's something you do. And the moment you step into activation, heaven begins to partner with you. This is the shift from passive faith to active faith. Passive faith says, God can. But active faith says, God can, and I'm stepping where He's pointing. Passive faith watches others move. Active faith says, Lord, I'm ready. If you call me, I'll go. If you send me, I'll walk. If you show me, I'll follow. And let me tell you something. Once you activate what God placed in you, you'll begin to see His hand moving in ways you never imagined. You'll realize that God was waiting on your movement before He released your miracle. Everything changes the moment you decide that observing God is not enough. You must join Him. When you take that small beginning, that crescent-shaped promise, that quiet whisper in your spirit, and you turn it into motion, heaven responds. The winds shift, the path clears, strength rises, favor follows, because God always backs obedience. And the moment your faith becomes active, your destiny becomes unstoppable. When God ushers you into a new year, He's not just turning a page on the calendar. He's shifting the atmosphere around your life. Walking into 2025 is not about stepping into another 12 months. It's about stepping into another dimension of who God has called you to be. This year is not waiting to see what you will do. This year is waiting for you to recognize what God has already placed within you. There is a boldness that God wants to rise up in you. A boldness that comes from knowing the one who goes before you, the one who walks beside you, and the one who strengthens you from within. Too many people drag yesterday's doubts into tomorrow's destiny. They carry old fears into new seasons. But 2025 is not a year to tiptoe. It's not a year to walk in timid faith, hoping life doesn't hit too hard. This is a year where God is calling you to walk with your shoulders back, your spirit steady, and your heart anchored in the truth that you are not entering this season alone. When God says, "Fear not," it's not a suggestion. It's a declaration backed by divine authority. He's reminding you, I already cleared the ground. I already paved the way. I already positioned the blessing. All I need is your bold step. Boldness doesn't mean you won't feel uncertain. Boldness doesn't mean you'll never face challenges. Boldness means you refuse to let fear have the final say. It means you walk even when the path isn't fully lit, because the crescent God placed in your hand is enough to guide the next step. It means you stop asking, "What if it doesn't work?" and start declaring, "What if God shows his glory through this?" Boldness is faith wrapped in courage, standing on God's promises, moving with God's timing, trusting God's hand, even when you can't trace every detail. 2025 will bring opportunities that require you to step out of old comfort zones. There will be rooms God calls you to enter where you once felt unqualified. There will be decisions you must make that cause your heart a race. But that trembling is not your weakness. It's your spirit expanding. It's God stretching you into the version of yourself he designed long before fear ever tried to shrink you. Every bold step you take in 2025 is a proclamation that you believe God is bigger than your doubts and stronger than your insecurities. Walking boldly means you stop rehearsing the failures of your past and start remembering the faithfulness of your God. You remind yourself of the storms he carried you through, the mountains he moved, the nights he sustained you, and the moments he lifted you when you didn't even know how to stand. Every testimony from your past becomes fuel for your future. You don't enter 2025 empty. You enter equipped. God is calling you to walk with expectation this year. Expect his guidance. Expect his provision. Expect his clarity. Expect his breakthrough. Expect his presence to surround you in ways you've never experienced before. Expect him to turn what looked delayed into what becomes divinely timed. Expect him to transform what once frustrated you into what eventually elevates you. You can walk into this year knowing that the same God who held you together in the last season is the same God who is preparing to unfold new blessings in this one. Walking boldly also means walking with authority, not your authority, his. The authority that tells darkness it has no place in your life. The authority that rejects defeat. The authority that declares, A's for me and my house. This year we will follow God with everything in us. It means stepping into each day, knowing heaven backs your obedience and God honors your courage. So as 2025 opens before you like a new horizon touched by the first light of dawn, you walk forward knowing you are chosen, equipped, and empowered. You walk forward knowing that God's promises do not expire, his purpose does not pause, and his strength does not run out. You walk forward because boldness is not an emotion. It is a spiritual decision to trust the author of your destiny more than the noise around you. And when you decide to walk boldly, heaven decides to walk with you.